Welcome back to another debunking video. This is going to be a quickie that I stumbled upon. UATV, otherwise known as Ukrinform, is an international channel owned directly by the Cabinet of Ministers, which is currently led by the Prime Minister of Ukraine, Volodymyr Groysman, who in the past called the entire cabinet as idiots, I should add, when he just replaced ex-Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk. This refute is in the defense of both everyday Ukrainians as well as the people of Donbass, and I'll fully explain why after the 3-minute report. Let's begin with my usual presentation of showing the report and then pausing key points that need to be refuted.
A few years ago, they were learning how to fight a common enemy. This video footage shows Russian and Ukrainian military personnel at joint exercises 2 years before the war started in the east of Ukraine. A couple of years passed, and Russian troops occupied the Crimea and then Donbass. Illegal armed formations from Russia presented themselves as residents of Donbass. Hiding behind the backs of civilians, they occupied a part of Ukrainian territory. They were supported by intelligence officers and locals brainwashed by Russian propaganda.
The footage shown after the joint military drills is from the anti-Maidan movement. What surprised me the most is that this footage is still, till this day, considered as Russian special forces taking over a government-held building in Donetsk, when in reality it was protesters occupying the buildings, the same exact way that Western and Central Ukrainians did in Euromaidan. The reason that in 2014 they were announced by medias that they were Russian soldiers is that in Crimea, the Russian troops there were also unmarked, no insignias, and claiming to be self-defense forces. But in this video, footage is on screen now, happened in Kramatorsk and shows half of them not having their faces covered, nor professionalism, but more of a blitzkrieg move, not even matching uniforms. It's literally some protesters in camo jackets and balaclavas that could be bought at any military store, and their AK-74 variants have been phased out by Russia since long time ago. There is no AK-74 M3s here, nor special forces like communication between the guys in balaclavas. In the background, it could even be heard that some of these masked guys are Soviet-Afghan war veterans. If anybody wants further proof, and I can't believe I'm saying this, you can check out some of the first Russian roulette episodes by Vice, where Simon Ostrovsky interviews people that look exactly like these guys here and spoke in Eastern Ukrainian accents, saying how they bought all of their gear in stores. As for the human shields claim, that has never happened. Ukrainian outlets always try to twist this, even hardcore Ukrainian nationalist YouTubers. I remember when this footage was first released on May 2nd, 2014, shortly after the anti-terrorist operation begun. This was in Slavyansk, Donetsk. And the Ukrainian BTR actually opens fire on the unarmed civilians trying to stop it with their bare hands, but obviously UATV isn't going to show that part of the footage, which is on screens now. To prove it, that BTR is Ukrainian. You can see the white stripes on the armor that symbolize that it is Ukrainian. Coincidentally, this report came out at the same time frame when a nationalist put claims that Russians used Crimeans as human shields, when in fact, those are Ukrainian uniforms at this side of the fence, and on the other side, Russian troops weren't in a combat state in this situation. That's why there's civilians there trying to convince the Ukrainian security guards to surrender. All weapons were on safety in this incident. In Crimea, there was only one raid against one Ukrainian guard post with no casualties. The only 3 civilian casualties in Crimea were due to brawls between Russian and Ukrainian supporters.
Cities, towns, and villages were occupied by militants. Columns with Russian military personnel, equipment, weapons, and ammunition entered through sections of the border not controlled by Ukraine.
This footage is from Misinformation, a civilian activist news outlet which I have 5-episode mini-series made just to debunk all of their claims from footages that they either cut or images that they photoshopped, etc, etc. Speaking of Inform Napalm and Human Shields, if anybody wants more info on both of those, Episode 3 link titled Human Shields will be down in the description with footages of Ukrainian BTRs shooting at civilian crowds in Donetsk with no rebels in sight. So with that being said, that first T-72B3 tank that drove by, I have huge doubts that this footage is even from Ukraine. Otherwise, why is it from the Inform Napalm's channel instead of the original source? There's no way this was filmed by a Ukrainian media.
Active hostilities were underway in the east of the country. The Ukrainian army lived by Soviet standards and was not ready for a military invasion. Owing to the growing aggression of Russia, Ukraine's armed forces needed urgent reforms. Along with rearmament and new provisions, Ukraine improved the training of its troops. Instructor missions from NATO countries arrived in Ukraine.
Switching to NATO standards in Ukraine during wartime is just putting Ukraine in huge debt. Ukraine has a brilliant research and development and production facilities, technology on par with, and in some cases even better than, Russian technology. Many Ukrainians wanted European economic bloc aspirations, not NATO aspirations. I'll explain a little further down why this is putting debt to Ukraine.
Canadian, British, and American instructors now train Ukrainians constantly. At the same time, they also gain a lot of knowledge from Ukrainian servicemen. The military drills are held several times a year, both in Ukraine and in European Union countries.
Showing Humvees should not be a positive change to Ukraine. Ukrainian soldiers that were interviewed using Humvees, as well as Ukrainian military expert reviewers, would constantly say, and I quote, "Humvees are really expensive to maintain and are ineffective. If going for the same time era vehicle, we can buy an UAZ 4x4 for $400, whereas a Humvee's repair bill is insane, $1,200 just to fix one wheel. That amounts to 3 UAZs. And if we're going for production by price, we'd rather produce our own state-sponsored Kraz vehicles, such as the Kraz Spartan." End quote. I remember that line really well because I've heard it from a personal interview I've conducted, as well as a Ukrainian review show. The Humvees were given to Ukraine for free, sure. Old rusted Humvees, however, which even the medias couldn't avoid. So Ukraine is furthermore forced to pay the repair bills for non-maintained, decade-old vehicles it received.
And at the beginning of April, the crew of a Canadian frigate held joint exercises with Ukrainian sailors and pilots in the Black Sea. The Ukrainian military is changing its command system and is switching to NATO standards for planning military operations and commanding troops.
Upgrading to Windows 10 Basic Edition as evident by the screen lock wallpaper and the US Army logos on Google Map pictures in a paint-like program? Seriously, you can see the cropping edge and the mouse cursors here.
We intend to raise the level of readiness at all headquarters. Taking into account the procedures of NATO countries, our priority is preparation and coordination of operational and strategic headquarters using simulation systems and the experience of real military operations. Since the war with Russia began, schools for tank operators, anti-tank gunners, snipers, and operators of unmanned aerial vehicles were established in Ukraine.
That tank simulator they just showed is called the Desna Simulator Training Center in Kiev. This is the one and only tank simulator for T-64 tanks and has been operational since even before early 2015. I even have a translated Ukrainian Zbroyar translated episode that features this room. There is nothing NATO standard about this, and again undermines Ukrainian ingenuity and capabilities. If I would have to theorize, these parts are shared with their Russian counterpart simulators since their tanks are almost practically identical. If the Ukrainian military were to adopt, say, MILES, the Multiple Integrated Laser Engagement System, then that would be a NATO standard. MILES is basically laser tag with a blank cartridges, and countries such as Poland, Romania, and other Eastern European countries use it. There was only one report by Ukrainian 1+1 Media Union that Ukraine was going to receive MILES, but it has yet to be seen.
Army professionals are trained based on real combat experience, using the latest developments. Ukrainian servicemen are constantly preparing for the most varied possible attacks from Russian hybrid forces, not only in the rear, but also near the front line. Infantry, artillery, and aircraft divisions are always at combat readiness.
Oh, look, it's those white stripes I mentioned earlier that symbolize Ukrainian tech.
Their exercises in the area of the Joint Forces operation continue.
Курс 200, удаление 1800.
Today, Ukraine is the only country in Europe at war, restraining the Russian aggressor for the past 5 years. According to the Ukrainian General Staff, the threat of invasion from Russia from the north, east, and from the annexed Crimea is greater than ever. The new Ukrainian army is prepared for any turn of events in the war. Reported by Ihor Medalyan, UATV.
Invasion from all sides? The east, Crimea, and this is a new one, the north, through Chernobyl from Belarus, I'm guessing? Let's get real. It's a frozen conflict. For example, for 60 years, we've been hearing how North Korea's forces pose a risk greater than ever. But that's a frozen conflict as well. The only issue here is that mainstream medias are scaring their civilians. In this case, putting fear to the average Ukrainians to ignore the domestic problems of a nation, such as corruption and embezzlement, and look abroad for issues to take away their minds of national problems with fear of an invasion. The most horrific things that have happened in 2018 was that both NATO and Russia performed record-breaking largest military exercises in history. NATO's Trident 2018 and Russia's Vostok 2018. Vostok meaning east, meaning far, far away from the Ukrainian border. These drills are rotational and annual for both sides. Russia rotates its drill with north, west, south, east, increasing troops from 30,000 to 300,000 since 2016 to 2018. And NATO also holding the Trident exercise annually, but increasing the amount of countries participating. Last year with a record of 31 countries, including Ukraine, participating. But that's fine. That should not cause alarm for a large-scale conflict. I would argue that it actually is a deterrence for peace, just as with the nuclear age, that an attack by anyone to anyone is suicidal for all parties. The reason the Ukrainian cabinet wants to scapegoat and exaggerate its war and foreign problems is because the cabinet is full of billionaire oligarchs that funded the creation of volunteer battalions, and they only to themselves profit from the war economy, such as Arsen Avakov. It's even ironic how ex-cabinet minister, governor of Odessa, and ex-Georgian president Mikhail Saakashvili resigned due to claims of corruption, and footage existing of him and Arsen Avakov arguing about which one of them is more corrupt. Coincidentally, ex-Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk also left due to him claiming that he could no longer deal with the corruption of the cabinet and the government anymore. As for the reason why this hurts the Ukrainian people is that not only does it invoke fear into them and hatreds towards their neighbors, but it's done so in a way where only the cabinet and their circle that includes people such as Ihor Kolomoisky and Alexander Turchinov to profit from the war economy. This also hurts the Donbass people because they are seen as the aggressors. Caution, by the way, I am not talking about Russia here, because Donbass and other areas such as Odessa and Kharkov had their own protesting movement called the Anti-Maidan movement, which was parallel, a true mirror of Euromaidan, with the one difference of being against the newly installed post-Lukashenko government. This report is intended to make Ukrainian citizens believe that we are safer and also in debt by gratitude of NATO helping us convert into NATO standards, when in reality the debt comes from tax-paying pockets, since it is very, very expensive to fully switch to a NATO standard when it is cheaper and more patriotic to build Ukrainian designs which also have the capabilities to produce their own NATO standard weapons. The only benefactors from this type of propaganda report are the rich oligarchs and the arms corporations that sell or, quote, donate their weapons to Ukraine that have to be maintained under Ukraine's already exhausting funds.
Thank you for watching this video. Ukraine War Awareness is currently building a team and has hired me to be the new narrator for his videos. We are also using a brand new professional microphone, as I'm sure you can hear the difference in quality between my closing narration and him in this video. If you like this content, please consider donating to support this channel and speed up his staff recruitment. Even $1 can go a long way, and regardless of either through Patreon or Coffee, you will receive exclusive perks and previously unseen footages from UWA's insiders. We are also on Discord. Come on down if you want to discuss any topics. Let us know what you think of this video in the comment section below.